Afternoon, Frankie. Afternoon, Jack. Let's get on with chapter 5 of Coraline. Let's quickly show you a picture of the other mother and the other father. There we go. That's what we was talking about in yesterday's little segment. So let's get started with chapter 5. Right, chapter 5. Coraline locked the door of the drawing room with the cold black key. She went back into the kitchen and climbed onto the chair. She tried to put the bunch of keys back on the top of the door again. She tried 4 or 5 times before she was forced to accept that it just wasn't big enough, and so she put them down on the counter next to the door. Her mother still hadn't returned from her shopping expedition. Coraline went to the freezer and took her spare loaf from frozen bread to the bottom compartment. She made herself some toast with jam and peanut butter. She drank a glass of water. She waited for her parents to come back. When it began to get dark, Coraline microwaved herself a frozen pizza. Then Coraline watched television. She wondered why grown-ups gave themselves all the good programs with all the shouting and the running around in. After a while, she started yawning. Then she undressed, brushed her teeth, and she put herself to bed. In the morning she went to her parents' room, but their bed hadn't been slept in, and they weren't around. She ate tinned spaghetti for breakfast. For lunch she had a block of cooking chocolate and an apple. The apple was yellow and slightly shriveled, but it tasted sweet and good. For tea she went down to see Mrs. Spinks and Miss Forcible. She had 3 digestive biscuits and a glass of lemonade and a cup of weak tea. The lemonade was very interesting. It didn't taste of anything like limes. It tasted bright green and vaguely chemical. Coraline liked it enormously. She wished they had it at home. How are you? How are your dear mother and father? Asked Miss Spink. Missing, said Coraline. I haven't seen either of them since yesterday. I'm on my own. I think I've probably become a single-child family. Tell your mother that we found the Glasgow Emperor Press clippings we were telling her about. She seemed very interested when Miriam mentioned them to her. She's vanished under mysterious circumstances, said Coraline, and I believe my father has as well. I'm afraid we'll be out all day tomorrow, Coraline lovely, said Miss Forcible. We are staying with April's niece in Royal Tunbridge Wells. They showed Coraline a photographic album with photos of Mrs. Spink's niece in it, and then Coraline went home. She opened her money box and walked down to the supermarket. She bought 2 large bottles of limeade, a chocolate cake and a new bag of apples, and went home and ate them for dinner. She cleaned her teeth and went into her father's office. She woke up the computer and wrote a story. Coraline's story. There was a girl, her name was Apple. She used to dance a lot. She danced and danced and danced till her feet turned into sausages. The end. She printed out the story and turned off the computer. Then she drew a picture of a little girl dancing underneath the words of the paper. She ran herself a bath with too much bubble bath in it, and the bubbles ran over the side and went all over the floor. She dried herself and then the floor as best she could and went to bed. Coraline woke up in the night. She went into her parents' bedroom, but the bed was made and empty. The glowing green numbers on the digital clock glowed 3:12 a.m. All alone in the middle of the night, Coraline began to cry. There was no other sound in the empty flat. She climbed into her parents' bed, and after a while she went back to sleep. Coraline was woken by cold paws battling her face. She opened her eyes. Big green eyes stared back at her. It was the cat. Hello, said Coraline. How did you get in? The cat didn't say anything. Coraline got out of bed. She was wearing a long t-shirt and pyjama bottoms. Have you come to tell me something? The cat yawned, which made its eyes flash green. Did you know where Mummy and Daddy are? The cat blinked at her slowly. Is that a yes? The cat blinked again. Coraline decided that was indeed a yes. Well, can you take me to them? The cat stared at her, then it walked out into the hall. She followed. It walked the length of the corridor and stopped at the very end, where a full-length mirror hung. The mirror had been a long time before the inside of a wardrobe. It had been hanging there on the wall when they had moved in, and although Coraline's mother had spoken occasionally of replacing it with something newer, she never had. Coraline turned on the light in the hall. The mirror showed the corridor behind her. That was only to be expected, but it also reflected in the mirror were her parents. They stood awkwardly in the reflection of the hall. They seemed sad and alone, and Coraline watched them wave to her, slowly with limp hands. Coraline's father had his arm round her mother. In the mirror, Coraline's mother and father stared at her. Her father opened his mouth and said something, but she could not hear nothing at all. Her mother breathed on the inside of the mirror glass, and quickly, before the fog faded, she wrote, "Help us!" With the tip of her forefinger in the fog on the inside of the mirror faded, and so did her parents. And now the mirror reflected only the corridor and Coraline and the cat. Well, I'll read a little bit more a bit later, so I hope you enjoy that. Speak to you soon. Love you.